Hello everyone, this is Overmind, and welcome back to another StarCraft 2 replay cast. Today I have for you a PvT from the upper echelons of the ladder. Yes, today I have for you a game in which we have a Protoss player from the Master League and a Terran player from the Grand Master League. And as long as we're talking about them anyway, let's go ahead and introduce them. Spawning up at the top right side of the map in red, getting his gas on, our terrifying Terran player from the Grand Master League, a player who clearly has been activated because it is SiegeMode. And spawning down on the bottom left side of the map, in blue, our Protoss player and our submitter of this game, our haver of cool clan symbols from the Master League, it is FrashQ! FrashQ at this point has the normal assortment of Protoss buildings. We have our Cyber Core coming on up, Assimilator Pylon Gateway over here, as well as a Pylon for Vision right on over here. And we have an expansion which has just started coming up as well. At the front of SiegeMode's base, we have the appearance of normalcy. We have the 2 supply depot, 1 barracks, sort of wall off here. And we have our refinery, which has been mining away. And the reason for that is because SiegeMode is feeling a little cheeky. He has his very own proxy factory at FrashQ's, what would be his third? And he's making Widow Mines. Because, of course, Widow Mines. Because Widow Mines have recently been buffed. And not only have they were they great before, but they've gone from being great to really great. So here we have some Marines heading out across the field. Stalker coming close to death. We have our very own personal SCV escort for this expedition. And here we have our Photon Overcharge. These Marines should be cleaned up pretty readily. Our Widow Mine goes off, killing his very own SCV escort. Now, this isn't too stressful, except we don't have detection yet. We definitely need to get detection up, and indeed there's the Chrono Boosted Observer. And hopefully it'll come up before the Widow Mine's recharge is done. That's all we need. We definitely don't want to get our probes all killed. Want to pull the probes away. Oh my gosh, it's so close to shooting again. And it's beautifully handled by FrashQ. This indeed is the work of a Master League player. Should be able to clean up this Widow Mine at the top of his ramp pretty easily with this. Oh, Stalker. Oh, poor Mama Ship Corps now has to deal with this all by her lonesome. However, we do believe in FrashQ. We know the power of the Mothership Corps. He does have this nice observer over here. He should be okay. SiegeMode, leaving his Widow Mine unburrowed. And then, in fact, burrowing it, and doing something very clever. In fact, actually scans above his Widow Mine to get rid of that awful observer, because having observers on the field really interferes with his plan of having Widow Mines in FrashQ's natural. And SiegeMode just simply cannot stand for that. So we have a Widow Mine with 2 kills, a Widow Mine with 1 kill, Widow Mine with 0 kills here. Looks like our more senior Widow Mines are going to move on out as the second observer of the evening joins us to help this Stalker kill off the remaining Widow Mine. And in fact, we still have probes being chrono boosted throughout all of this. Both of our players have been macroing quite well, in fact. Looks like FrashQ is going to scout out a bit and see this remaining Widow Mine and kill it off. But I want to go ahead and note FrashQ has done an excellent job of continuing to make workers. You can see that he's actually ahead of SiegeMode. SiegeMode, of course, is ahead in army supplies, since that is what he has been dedicating himself to making. And in fact, we see this natural being saturated quite well. Over here we have a little number of Marines and Marauders heading out across the map. We have our barracks producing 2 Marines at a time with that reactor, our double tech lab researching combat shield as well as stim, and we're going to go ahead and add on a starport, which is quite good. We have our observer scouting for FrashQ, and our observer will encounter this and be able to see this scary little bio ball that's coming across the map. We actually should have stim done and combat shields done very quickly, and I imagine that's when SiegeMode will make his move, since both of those are quite good upgrades, and this early in the game this is a very scary timing for Protoss players. Over here we do see a handful of units, as well as some nice sentries, which hopefully will get some good force fields in, and we have our Mothership Core, of course, with enough energy to Whew, photon overcharge, because that's our saving grace this early in the game, right, Protoss players? Ah, and here comes the attack. There's the stim, we have the photon overcharge, and it looks like SiegeMode's going to focus fire the Nexus. FrashQ's army getting a lot of damage in on SiegeMode's, however the Nexus does fall. And a new one is put in its place almost immediately, a brief supply block for FrashQ after that attack. He does pursue this small remaining army. However, I want to go ahead and note that during that time, SiegeMode did something quite good. He's gone ahead and taken his third. As you would expect, this is a very good thing to do while you are attacking, because he might well be able to make an economic recovery while FrashQ is recovering from the damage that attack did. We do still have this base being rebuilt as we speak. We don't yet have a third for FrashQ. We have a scan here on this army, and SiegeMode's going to see exactly what's up here at the front. But I want to go ahead and note that while the worker supply is still slightly in FrashQ's favor, now evening out, we have SiegeMode with a much larger army supply. He'll be up a base, he'll be able to produce workers faster, and of course, he has mules because he's a Terran. So, all should be pretty good for SiegeMode by and large, even though he didn't necessarily immediately win the game with his harassment. He's certainly done a decent amount of damage, certainly put the pressure on FrashQ. That's going to be quite good for him. FrashQ doing something that's also quite good, taking a third of his own, going to go ahead and try and stabilize back into that sort of more typical mid and late game composition that Protoss likes to have. We do have a decent number of Marines and Marauders and Medevacs coming across, picking off that observer, scanning. Here we have again the attack. Guardian Shield and Force Fields go down. A little bit of back and forth. Now I want to go ahead and note that we do have a High Templar here, and I believe, yes, in fact, storms are done, doing a fairly large amount of damage on this army in the second storm. Again, hitting quite well. Our Photon Overcharge doing a decent amount of damage. We have these nice Immortals here at the front with a Guardian Shield on them. And most of the ground units there were cleaned up. Most of our Medevacs are empty. We do have one that's loaded up. And we have this nice observer over here, which is going to spot all of this and be able to follow it around, which is quite good. Oftentimes you'll see Protoss players put a pylon sort of just past this little choke point to their third to make sure that they spot any incoming attacks from there. However, since we have this nice eye on the army in the form of an observer, we're in good shape. We did see a nice feedback from our friend the High Templar just a moment ago, and we see our observer friend continuing to follow this army around as it sort of circles around towards the third, which is a very common thing for Terrans to do. And these units back the heck up with stim, since they certainly cannot engage this army here. We do have additional units coming in for SiegeMode to supplement this attack, to continue to keep pressure on his Protoss opponent. And in fact, SiegeMode actually does indeed have a decent number of workers mining over here at his own third, so he's not really behind, he's just making sure to continue to be aggressive. And we have back and forth, micro, all the normal stuff you would expect to see at a high level of play, while at the same time we see lots and lots of probes continuing to be built, a command center continuing to be built so that we can have another expansion here soon from SiegeMode. We have upgrades being researched. We have a Colossus Den going down. And here we have some Widow Mines burrowing here at the front, which is going to be quite important for FrashQ to pay attention to. He did just have his observer killed off, however he does know that the Widow Mines are there, so it looks like he's going to go ahead and send those Zealots in. And SiegeMode doing something very clever, once again, pulls his Widow Mines out before they can fire on those useless Zealots, so that they can continue to engage the rest of the army. FrashQ, with the excellent control, manages to leave just one or two Zealots behind to activate those Widow Mines. Does get a bit of a hit off with that storm. However, SiegeMode did manage to pull his army out of the majority of it. Naturally, there's going to be a bit of healing going on. A Zealot did run forward to try and activate additional Widow Mines. Fortunately, that was needless. However, FrashQ is being quite prudent. It's better safe than sorry. when it comes to Widow Mines, because they will take down a big chunk of your shields if you let them hit your army. We will have those Widow Mines recharging though as we continue forward. And Widow Mines have been detonated. FrashQ's army is moving forward, not quite able to break this siege mode, trying to pick off an Archon. Storm kind of misses the army, but that's okay. The armies have separated once again. And I want to go ahead and note that siege mode is actually expanding, as is FrashQ, while all of this is going on. So, for those of you in the lower leagues, if you want something to work on, multitasking is actually really, really great. We have Widow Mines continuing to burrow. Lots of back and forth. A storm goes down on a decent chunk of the army. Additional Widow Mines to reinforce the Widow Mine blockade. As is common on this map, we do have a lot of action right here in this choke point between one of our players' thirds and this area that's open that can easily house an army. We have a storm that goes down on a chunk of this army. Zealots again continuing to rush forward to try and activate those Widow Mines. We have a bit of a stim and a move forward. Oh, FrashQ, be so careful. Siege mode might actually push through here. He does get an assimilator. Storm goes down. And we have lots and lots of back and forth. Lots and lots of storms. Our storms may not necessarily always hit the bulk of the army, but they have been hitting the Widow Mines. You can see how low the health of these Widow Mines is right now at this point. We have an assimilator being rebuilt during all of this stress and difficulty for FrashQ. FrashQ continuing to warp more units, continuing to get his upgrades. He's about to have that extended thermal lance finish up. Meanwhile, our Terran player is getting 3-3, which is going to be very good for him once that finishes along, because once the Bio Ball is fully upgraded, it is quite good. We do have Ghosts here in Siege Mode's army, trying to get those EMPs off. FrashQ trying to pick off the Ghosts. Oh, be so careful of those Widow Mines. Additional Widow Mines reinforcing this. 2 of them going off on a single probe. Storm goes off on a bit of the army. FrashQ doing quite a good job of, once his High Templar are out of energy, morphing them into Archons. Do have a proxy pylon over here for FrashQ now. And a bit of scouting going on from him, which is very good. He definitely wants to know what siege mode is up to while all of this is going on. So you can see those zealots are running around, just looking, seeing what they can see with their little zealot eyes. And here we have a Ghost moving forward, trying to get that EMP. Not quite managing to, it's okay. Lots and lots of damage going down from the Colossus in the back. The Nexus does fall here, which is kind of unfortunate for FrashQ. However, Siege Mode does relent in his attack now that he has made that Nexus fall down. We do have a replacement Nexus being built, and soon this third will be back up and running. I want to go ahead and note that at Siege Mode's base, we actually have several command centers which look like they're going to be made into planetaries for defense. So this will be the most defended base ever. Or, excuse me, they have a couple that are being made into planetaries, 2 that are actually being made into orbital commands. So, good spread, but still a good amount of defense over here. Over here a bit ago I did see a little bit of attacking, which I think was coming from that proxy pylon. However, it has been cleaned up. A little bit of back and forth from both of these armies. Again, this is quite a tense moment. Several SCPs were just killed off there, but I don't think that's a big loss for Siege Mode at this point. He is fully maxed out at 200, so losing a few SCVs is not a big deal at all to him, and in fact might benefit him since it will free up some supply. There was a very good storm just a moment ago on Siege Mode's army. We do have a number of Vikings doing some decent damage to those Colossi in the back, and in fact we see them falling on down. However, the ground army for Siege Mode is taking quite the beating with all the storms, with all the Archons. And I believe it's just a couple Ghosts and a couple Marauders at this point, and then his Sky army. Whew, lots of action so far, lots of stress. Still having some mining going on at this base for FrashQ. This base is up and saturated now for FrashQ, so he's making a bit of a recovery there. We do have this probe making sure that this expansion is not taken by SiegeMode. This probe, making sure to check it out. A couple of units here for SiegeMode, going to go ahead and do that harass to the third. And looks like they're going to be picked up. We do have our High Templar, which does not get the feedback, but there isn't much energy on that medevac anyway. A couple of Zealots being warped in over here, Cannon doing a bit of damage. And this is something that Terran players who are good will do. They'll just harass you and harass your mineral lines with these dropships as they continue to macro and attack with their main army. We do see lots of pickups here. A very good response by FrashQ. He manages not to overreact to this. He'll warp in a few Zealots. He'll build a cannon and a pylon, that's fine. But he's not going to send his whole army back or make himself out of position in any way. He's just going to go ahead and monitor the situation and make sure that it doesn't get too out of hand. As far as army is concerned, we have, looks like mostly Vikings for SiegeMode still. He has a decent air force. However, he is adding on Ghosts and Marines and all of those normal sort of ground units. We see some additional Colossi have been added into the army for FrashQ. We see him spreading himself out and bunching back up again as he positions himself around. He does know that this army is here. He does know what's going on here. He has this observer. There is still a drop going on in his natural, but he's not going to move out of position and concern himself about that too much. He's going to focus on killing those ghosts so that they don't get those EMPs down. And storms do go down on the army. Very nice storms, killing off lots of SiegeMode's army, particularly his ground army. We do have him circling around a bit. We have a lot of the Colossi dying there to those Vikings. However, of course, things like Immortals, Stalkers, and Archons are quite good against a large Sky army. And a decent amount of stuff from SiegeMode does actually wind up dying there. I want to go ahead and look at the army supply. Right now it's 59 to 54, which is not a huge difference, but FrashQ has managed to even it up a bit. Worker supply is slightly in SiegeMode's favor. However, at this point, they're still quite close, even at this stage in the game as they get into their later tech units. Do you see some proxy pylons around the map for FrashQ? FrashQ's pylon is actually blocking SiegeMode's potential expansion area, so I'm sure that he will not be happy about that at all. He does go ahead and scan there and sees that this is kind of a problem. A couple of Zealots do warp in, however they will be cleaned up right quick. And indeed, SiegeMode is going to take this expansion. FrashQ is unhappy. He's unhappy about this whole expansion taking experience. He's going to jockey his army around a bit. We see that he has a remaining pylon not too far away from this expansion. And he, in fact, is moving up around the side. We can see that SiegeMode here does have the high ground advantage. However, FrashQ does have a fairly sizable force. And he did have vision there for a moment while he was attacking uphill. See a storm keeping the rest of SiegeMode's army at bay. More jockeying for position from FrashQ and SiegeMode. Ghosts at the front trying to get them EMPs off. And lots of damage going down to the Colossi from the Vikings. Lots and lots of damage going down by the Colossus before they are killed. And this ground army does do a decent amount of damage to the air army. The Vikings deciding to land and then thinking better of it, which I believe was the correct decision there. And now FrashQ is actually heading for this base. Workers are fleeing as quickly as possible. And here we have the Zealots coming in, the Stalkers arriving, the Immortals cleaning things up. Looks like we do have another base, our other orbital command, our backup from SiegeMode. And we have a Zealot here just to make sure that he is apprised of the operations going on at this potential expansion site. We have a few units from SiegeMode running about. And we do have this nice expansion here for FrashQ. We have a little DT up at the front, trying to do a bit of guarding there. And in fact, since he is cloaked and SiegeMode has not yet scanned, he's doing a lot of damage. Doing much in the way of cleaning this up. We do have a skirmish out in the middle of the field. And at this point, FrashQ actually is leading in army size pretty significantly. 100 to 63. We have this base being cleaned up again by FrashQ, who has eventually begun to do the damage that he needs to do. Of course, both players are mined out at home. However, the naturals are also pretty well mined out, and the third is completely mined out for SiegeMode, not quite so for FrashQ, so he has very, very little income at this point. Both players keeping their money low, which is in fact quite a good thing. We have a couple of DTs following SiegeMode's army around, getting some damage done. Not quite scanning yet. I don't know if he doesn't have the energy or if he simply doesn't notice quite yet, but unfortunately he is taking a bit of damage from that. There we are, there's the scan. Of course he does have the ability to heal. FrashQ taking out the missile turret at the front. Forcing another scan, keeping those mules from being a problem. We do have an expansion over here for SiegeMode at the gold, which could be very, very, very game-turning because they will get a lot of minerals from a gold expansion. We have mules dropping down at that gold right away. We have another expansion over here. FrashQ immediately begins his harassment on that. Cannot have that expansion going down. But right now, as far as income, this is the big savior for SiegeMode. This is his one and only hope. He needs to go ahead and get that income so that he can rebuild his army. However, right now, FrashQ is at his front door. He's actually just kind of able to march right in, I believe, if he, can take out this army, which I believe he can. At this point, SiegeMode has had some trouble producing. We see some very good storms going down. We see some damage from the Colossi in the back. Stalkers blink forward. And there we have the GG. So that's it, you guys. And that was very exciting. Thank you to FrashQ for submitting that. I want to go ahead and say right off that what we really saw was not just really interesting and great micro, lots of aggression, but what we saw was really good macro to back it up, and that's what made this game so good. So for those of you out there in the lower leagues, go ahead and make sure that you always make sure that your macro is sharp. You will be in good shape, just like these players. I hope you enjoyed this game. For those of you who would like to see me cast one of your games, go ahead and send it in to NoobCrafted@gmail.com. For those of you who are too gosu to know how to spell noob at this point, that is NoobCrafted@gmail.com. For additional updates or such like that, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel, all of that good stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the ladder.